fall I planted a little patch of wheat in my garden because I wanted to know if I could grow it, and I wanted to see just what was involved in threshing it and winnowing it and grinding it into flour. And I made videos of everything from growing it to cutting it, threshing it, winnowing it, and I had just about completed the entire video, and I was waiting until I got all of the wheat processed before I completed it, because I wanted to see how much wheat I would actually get from a 13 by 18 foot plot of wheat. And wouldn't you know, my computer died, and I have someone that thinks they might be able to recover those videos for me, but I haven't had time to get around to having that done. I had to buy a new computer, and but I still have this box of wheat that I need to do something with. And on top of that, the wheat that I did process, I left the top off of it and bugs got into it, and I ended up feeding that to the chickens. But today I want to take some of this wheat and find out just how much time is involved in getting 1 cup of wheat, because I tell you, from what I've learned from this, it is very time intensive threshing the wheat. Growing it was very easy, but the threshing part, it would be a full-time job just to produce enough wheat each day for a loaf of bread. And so I'm telling you this because you either need to stock up heavily on wheat or start working towards finding a way to make yourself some sort of a threshing machine. The best that I could come up with was my corn grinder. I found that I can run the wheat through this and it will thresh it. So I'm going to show you how I did that. Just found I can take some wheat and put it into the grinder. And I have the wheels on the corn grinder opened up about as far as they'll go. As you can see, it flies everywhere and makes a big mess. And like I said, growing the wheat was easy. All I did was make a quick pass over my garden with my rototiller, and I took some wheats, not seeds, but just some wheat that I bought over the internet that was meant for consumption, and I scattered them over the soil. And you're supposed to plant it so that it's 25 seeds per square foot, but since I had vacuum sealed that wheat, I was afraid it might have affected the germination rate, so I went a little heavier with it, and it all came up. Vacuum sealing didn't seem to affect it at all. And what I found was that even though I had sowed it heavier in places, that where it grew thicker, I ended up with like one plant with one seed head, but where it had more room to grow, it would throw up like, you know, several stalks with several seed heads. So it's pretty much like no matter how thick you plant it, you're going to get the same amount of the seed heads from it, whether it's thick or thin, as long as you want to stay in that 25 seed per foot range. That seems to be the optimal number. So it grew, and really didn't have to do anything to it, and I threw a little fertilizer on it in the spring, and then around June or so it dried up, and I went out there to cut it. It was going to rain that day, and I wanted to get it cut before it rained. And I started out by gathering up bunches of the wheat and just cutting it with some little pruning shears. I mean, if you had acres of the stuff, that wouldn't be a good way to go about it. But as the rain came on faster, I ended up just pulling it up by the roots. And I'll tell you what, that was actually the faster and easier way to go about it. And if I had like maybe 2 acres of it, I might even do it that way versus, you know, using a sickle on it or something like that. And after I got the wheat up, the problem was, and this was very time consuming, that when the wheat grew, the seed heads would be staggered like this. They're not like all the same height like this. They end up staggered. And doing it by hand, if I didn't want to thresh all the stalks and then have to winnow all of that out, so what I wanted to do was just to have as much, you know, just heads of the wheat as I could. And there was really no fast, easy way to go about just getting the heads off, so I had to sit and cut all the heads off of each one of the stalks. And I found the fastest way in the end was just to gather them up like that and then take scissors and cut the heads off. But that was very time consuming in itself. And so from that stage, I ended up with the wheat, you know, in the box. And so then the next challenge was how to get the wheat out of the seeds, out of these heads. And traditionally what they'll do is they'll take like wooden bats and put the wheat on the ground and just beat the wheat with bats, and then the little kernels will pop out of those heads. But I don't have the stamina for that. So what I found, and I tried a lot of different ways. I tried just hitting it with a rubber mallet, and you name it, I tried it. And I found the easiest way for me was this corn grinder. So I'm going to see just how long it takes me to get enough so that I'll end up with a cup of wheat. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind on this for 30 minutes and see what I end up with. And I will have to run it through a second time because there will still be some, like this one, the seeds are still left in that and it won't winnow out. So, and I also found that pushing it through with a wooden spoon works well, because if you get your fingers caught in there, I'm pretty sure you can break your fingers with this corn grinder. So I'll be back in 30 minutes and show you what I came up with. It hasn't been 30 minutes yet, but I thought I'll let you see how I'm doing this. I found it's best if you put the seed heads in down so that they're upright the way they go. They feed through the grinder faster that way. So the first time I did this, I thought, geez, maybe I'm doing something wrong. It's taking forever to get this done. But I looked on the internet at the way people in other countries do it by hand, and hey, there'd be 20 or 30 people out there working on it. They weren't coming up with much more than I was, so it's a long, slow process. Okay, it's been 30 minutes, and this is how much wheat I ran through, and I'll run it through again. As you can see, that box didn't get much done, but running it through the first time really gets a lot of the wheat out, and I'll put it in this pot, and all of the grains will settle to the bottom of this pan. So I'm going to remove some of them that way, and then run all of that through a second time. I'll show you here. So the corn grinder actually does a fairly decent job of threshing it. You can see that. I got the grains right out of it. So I'm going to run the rest of this through again. I'm going to set this aside. I'm almost done with the second pass, and the second pass is only taking me 15 minutes. Now I'm going to try to get rid of a lot of this chaff. Now, as you can see, I hope you can see it, it's pretty much nothing but trash left. All the grain has been pulled out of it and has dropped to the bottom of the pan. There's a, if you were going to use electricity, I've been determined to do this entirely by hand, but if you were going to use electricity or some kind of a fuel to do this, there's a good video on YouTube where a man is threshing his wheat with a 5-gallon bucket and an electric drill that he has chains attached to the drill bit. And that did a real good job. And if I wasn't so stubborn and was willing to use electricity for this, that's the way I would go. But I really wanted to see just how much trouble was involved in doing this by hand, entirely by hand. Okay, so the next process will be winnowing it. And if I can find that video of the bucket and the chains, I'll put a link to that in the description box, because that was real interesting. Okay, now I'm going to winnow the wheat. I have the wheat here. As you can see, there's a lot of trash in it. And what I'm going to do is drop a handful of wheat over a bucket and fan it with this plastic plate. And what will happen is the grains will drop into the bucket and a lot of the chaff will blow away. And, if you had electricity, and you could just do this in front of an electric fan. But this works too. Just depends on how much time you have to put into this. You would have to do this several times because there's still a lot of chaff falling into the bucket. Okay, this is the wheat after the first pass with the winnowing, and I'm going to do it again. Okay, this is after the second pass, and you can actually, some of what's left in here, there's still grains left in these pieces, and some of this is going to have to be picked out by hand because since that grain is still in there, it's going to keep dropping into the bucket. So I'm going to give it another pass. Now that I've winnowed everything out that I think I possibly can, I'm just going to have to do this a little at a time. Pick all the trash out. I'll put it in the bucket. After doing this, it really makes me wonder why on earth people have been growing and eating wheat for thousands of years, because corn seems like the better option in my opinion. So it's easy to grow. You get a lot more cornmeal out of corn with a lot less effort. I just don't understand why this is worth the effort. Okay, I've finished doing the little bit of wheat that I was working on. After 2 hours worth of work, that's what I ended up with, 2.5 cups of wheat. And like I said, it would be a full-time job for one person to produce enough wheat to furnish a family with bread. And you know, everybody should have to try this at least once, because it's quite an eye-opener. It makes it a lot easier to put in an order for wheat. And I still have to grind it into flour and all of that. So, thought I would clue you in on it, and that's probably why they're telling everybody stock up a wheat, because they don't want to have to do that. So, that's how I grew my own wheat. Hope it helps.